Hi, I'm with Vanya Thomas, Senior Relationship Manager at Guardian Trust. Today we're going to talk about what a trustee does and how they actually work in the financial services area, particularly around KiwiSaver and managed funds. So welcome, Vanya. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks, David. Very happy to be here.
It's great to get that expertise, and part of what Invested's all about is to get the people that know their biz and coming along and giving you, the public, an idea of some of the more technical aspects that are associated with financial services. So Vanya, look, for anyone that doesn't know, what's the trustee's role?
Yeah, so we're a financial markets supervisor, David, and we're licensed by the Financial Markets Authority. So part of our role is to safeguard the funds by holding them on trust. So we're independent and we act in the best interests of the investors. We have what's called a fiduciary duty. So boiling it down, we're there to do the right thing, make sure those providers are doing the right thing.
On the basis of that first line of defence,
Yep.
This is why you're licensed by the Financial Markets Authority.
That's right.
To make sure, essentially, that what the provider is offering is true to label. Is that right?
Well, that's exactly right. So specifically, some of the provider functions that we monitor are governance and how the unit price is calculated. We look at how the investments are made, how the register's maintained, that sort of thing. So we're ensuring that where a provider has said we're going to invest assets in a certain way,
Yep.
it's happening,
Right.
that they're charging the fees that they disclose that they would, and we really look at all of their legislative compliance.
So thinking about KiwiSaver, because most of our viewers will be probably a KiwiSaver member. When you talk about governance, it's a bit jargony as well, isn't it? But the responsibility, I guess, that you have is, what does that mean from governance? And more particularly, when you're talking about, again, asset classes and investment options,
Yep.
What are the things that you look at as a trustee to protect the investor?
Yeah, so governance, it is a word that gets bandied around quite a bit, but basically there are rules. Some of those rules are set out in what's called a governing document, and sometimes it's referred to as a trust deed. And also there are the offer documents, product disclosure statement and so on. And so really all the things that are in there in terms of the obligations and the duties, those are the things that we look at and ensure that the providers are discharging those obligations.
Right. And if, as a KiwiSaver member, they have a query or a concern, you're one of the places that they might come and talk
That's
to and say,
right.
look, you've got a problem, and you maybe help them through it?
Yeah, so the initial sort of person to go to or the entity to go to is the provider.
Yep.
But if an investor finds that they're really not getting the answers that they need, not getting the help that they're looking for, then they can come to the supervisor and, we can look into it on their behalf.
That's great. I mean, I think the confidence factor, and of course this is why, the FMA was set up to give confidence for New Zealanders to invest in the market. Your role is looking at the way the provider offers that service, but also, I guess, thinking about KiwiSaver, do you guarantee like the returns, or what are the things that you do and what perhaps you don't do that could be expected?
Well, it's a very interesting point you raise, because there is this sort of commonly held belief, and it's a misconception, that there is a guarantee.
Yes.
There is no guarantee, government or otherwise. But having said that, in the unlikely event that a provider was to become insolvent because they don't own the assets, each individual investor beneficially owns them, and the supervisor holds those assets on trust, it means that they're effectively ring-fenced, so an investor in the normal course of events wouldn't be out of pocket.
So that's great news, because certainly questions that we get quite regularly is people or investors are concerned that if the company that they're investing their KiwiSaver money into falls over, then they lose all their money. But that's not the case, because you're there to protect, I guess, making sure that those assets aren't invested in the company and they're invested in the market.
That's right. And so if that did happen, if a provider became insolvent and was unable to, meet its obligations and responsibilities, then the supervisor would transfer those assets to another provider, And, if a member decided that they weren't happy with that choice, they're still able to transfer to another provider
They
again.
can switch, can't they? So, Vanya, one of the roles obviously is making sure that you're the watchdog of the provider. If a customer or an investor has a problem with the product, and particularly the provider, it's not delivering a kind of the outcome they're looking for, can you give us some examples of what that might be, and then what they do to actually and how to approach you on it?
Yeah, well, there's all sorts of questions that people ask. Some people, for instance, aren't even sure which provider they're with. If you find yourself in that situation, then you can get in touch with Inland Revenue, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction. If you go to your provider and you ask them, for instance, about what sort of investments specifically do I have, and you're finding that the answers that you're getting are not what you expected, or you're just not happy with the level of service that you're getting, that's somewhere where someone can come to us and ask us to help, and we can perhaps get a better explanation.
Right. What about on the topic of fees, because that's been a bit of a spotlight over the years. But if people want better transparency, is this something else that you could help them work out or assist with?
That's right. We can certainly point people in the right direction in terms of looking at the offer documents under which they originally invested in the scheme, and then we can, often go back to the provider and just ask them to also work with the investor and give that better explanation that's required.
I guess one of the things is perhaps sometimes an investor believes they're going into a particular product and it's going to deliver a particular outcome, but then there's some disappointment. Is that another role that you've got to manage as well?
Well, it is, and I think people need to be aware that even if the providers are doing everything they should, following the rules, etc., and the supervisor is monitoring effectively, the balances of any investments are going to reflect the markets that they're invested in. So the balances will fall occasionally. So where there is volatility, so that means, movements up and down in terms of the returns, then the balances are going to reflect it.
And we've seen that this year already with KiwiSaver. As balances grow, the fluctuations will be there as well. Who pays for your services?
Yeah, so generally the supervisor fees are paid directly from the scheme. So it's kind of like a user pays service. It is so important, we think, because if you're talking about KiwiSaver, often it's the biggest asset or perhaps the second biggest after a family home that people have. So it's really important that that nest egg is looked after properly. We want to see people with more choices in their, post-work lives. Obviously, we're dealing with longevity, which is increasing, so people are living longer and they're in retirement for longer, and that means, spending when they're not earning. So we want to be part of really shaping the future of people being able to save more.
Vanya, look, thanks for that. I learned something more today as well. I hope that our viewers on Investor get a bit of insight. It's a really important role, and it's great to have someone like you come along today and give, I guess, the New Zealanders a better insight on what a trustee's role is. So thanks very much.
Thanks, David. We really take those supervisory responsibilities seriously.
Great.
Thank you.